A killer storms the classroom, every student frozen with fear, and the human Deathworlder just laughs. Every move is dodged, every strike anticipated, turning terror into awe. Witness the legend unfold and subscribe to HFY Sci-Fi now. The classroom was alive with the usual sounds of chatter, laughter, and the occasional groan from students struggling to stay focused. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns on the polished floors, and the smell of chalk and books mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the teacher's mug. Rows of desks were neatly arranged, each occupied by students who were either scribbling notes, doodling absent-mindedly, or quietly observing their classmates. At the front of the room, the teacher paced slowly, explaining a complex topic, waving a hand to emphasize points, and occasionally glancing at the clock, unaware of the danger about to enter. Among the students sat a human who seemed ordinary at first glance, quietly taking notes, occasionally glancing at the board, and occasionally tapping a pencil against the desk. There was nothing remarkable about their appearance. Plain clothes, neat hair, a calm expression. But beneath that calm exterior was a mind alert and aware of everything happening in the room. Other students occasionally noticed the human's strange calmness and whispered among themselves, commenting on how nothing seemed to faze them, how their eyes watched quietly, almost like they were observing the world from a distance. The door at the back of the classroom creaked suddenly, drawing the attention of everyone, and a chill ran down the spines of some students who instinctively tightened their grip on their notebooks. A shadow appeared in the doorway, and for a brief moment, the room held its breath, caught between curiosity and fear, as the shape of a person fully entered the classroom. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with a confidence that seemed to command attention. Their eyes scanning the room with cold precision, making the students shrink back in their seats. Some clutching pens like weapons, others too scared to even look. The human, however, didn't flinch, didn't tense, and didn't make a sound, simply observing the newcomer with a small, almost amused smile, as if recognizing something interesting about the figure in the doorway. It was a smile that gave nothing away, but somehow radiated a quiet confidence, a signal that no matter what arrived in the room, it would be met with a mind sharper than fear and reflexes quicker than panic. Students began to fidget, exchanging nervous glances, whispering about what they had seen in movies or read in stories about dangerous people, wondering if they were about to witness a real threat. The teacher, sensing the sudden tension in the room, paused mid-sentence, their voice faltering slightly, eyes narrowing toward the door. The killer's presence seemed to fill the room with an invisible pressure, a feeling that something was about to break the ordinary flow of the day, and every heartbeat seemed louder than normal. Desks that once held books and papers now felt like fragile barriers, chairs seemed less secure, and even the air seemed heavier, carrying the scent of fear and anticipation. Despite the growing tension, the human remained seated, pencil in hand, eyes following every movement of the intruder, analyzing posture, stance, and intent. It was not the kind of calm that came from ignorance or fearlessness, but from experience, from knowing that panic solves nothing, and clarity in moments of danger is more powerful than strength. The other students noticed it slowly, that strange aura of control, and some even felt a flicker of hope, realizing that not all was lost, that someone in the room might have the ability to turn the situation around. The killer took a deliberate step forward, the sound echoing across the polished floor, and every student shrank a little further into their seats, imagining the worst. But the human remained motionless, almost as if the sound barely registered, letting the tension build, studying, waiting, calculating, and secretly preparing for what was about to unfold. The room, once ordinary and predictable, had transformed into a stage where courage, fear, and curiosity clashed silently, and the human's quiet confidence stood as the only constant in the sea of panic. It was a moment suspended in time, the calm before the storm. The ordinary classroom now the setting for a confrontation that no one could have anticipated. Every pencil scratch, every whisper, every nervous glance amplified the suspense, and in that charged silence, the human's small smile was the only hint that they were ready. Ready for the challenge, ready for the chaos, ready to show that even in a world filled with fear and danger, a human could remain unshaken, alert, and in control. The students sat frozen, the teacher unsure of what to do next, and the killer unknowingly stepped into a situation far more dangerous than they had imagined. The ordinary classroom had become extraordinary in an instant, not because of weapons or threats, but because of the quiet, unwavering presence of a human who simply laughed at the fear around them. And in that moment, the air seemed charged with possibility. The kind of possibility that only appears when the most ordinary place meets the most extraordinary courage. The killer's presence filled the room like a dark cloud, heavy and threatening, as they stepped forward with slow, deliberate movements, eyes scanning every corner, every desk, every student. Their voice broke the silence, deep and chilling, describing in vivid detail the skills that had made them feared, the countless lives they had ended, and the power they now held in this classroom. Students froze, their faces pale, hearts racing, unable to look away from the menace standing just a few feet from them, some clutching their notebooks as if they could protect themselves with paper and ink. The killer's words were sharp and precise, meant to intimidate, meant to remind everyone that resistance was useless, and in their mind, fear would be enough to control the room. Some students tried to shrink into their seats, hoping to become invisible, while others whispered desperate prayers or thought of excuses to leave, their minds spinning with panic. Every movement the killer made seemed calculated to provoke terror. A slow step forward, a slight tilt of the head, a cold glare that pierced through anyone who dared meet it. Meanwhile, the human remained completely calm, sitting upright with shoulders relaxed, hands resting lightly on the desk, eyes fixed on the intruder, observing every detail without the slightest flicker of fear. A small, quiet smile played across the human's lips. Not a smile of amusement at danger, but a signal that the situation was far more interesting than frightening. The contrast between the terrified students and the unshaken human created a strange tension in the room, as if two worlds had collided, one of panic and one of composed awareness. The killer's attention gradually shifted from the cowering students to the human, sensing something unusual, something that resisted the natural reaction of fear. A flicker of curiosity passed through the killer's eyes, mingled with irritation, as they tried to understand how a single human could remain so calm in the face of imminent danger. The human's calmness was not weakness, and the killer could feel it. An invisible wall of confidence and experience that challenged their authority in the room. The killer stepped closer, testing boundaries, speaking of past conquests, the methods they had used, the precision of their strikes, attempting to unnerve the human. The human leaned back slightly, their eyes following the movements with a sharp focus, analyzing stance, strength, and intent, anticipating every possible outcome. Every whispered threat, every cold glare, seemed to bounce off the human as if hitting an invisible shield, leaving the killer frustrated and increasingly aware that this was no ordinary target. Other students began to notice the small details, the relaxed posture, the unwavering gaze, the faint smile. And slowly, awe replaced some of their fear, hope replacing hopelessness. The killer's frustration grew as they realized brute force and terror might not be enough, that mental intimidation could fail against someone who understood danger. They tried changing tactics, switching from threats to sudden movements, shifting their weight, gesturing with hands, creating an aura of unpredictability. But the human reacted with effortless precision, shifting slightly, leaning back, adjusting posture, each move subtle but perfectly timed, signaling control and readiness. The classroom's atmosphere was thick with suspense, every sound amplified. The scratching of pens, the shifting of chairs, the shallow breaths of frightened students, the soft tap of fingers on the desk. The human's calmness seemed almost contagious, with some students daring to peek from their hiding spots, realizing that if one person could remain so steady, perhaps not all hope was lost. The killer, now more intrigued than ever, circled the room slightly, eyes locked on the human, trying to find a crack in their composure, any hint of fear that could be exploited. The human silence and subtle amusement were maddening, each second stretching longer, making the killer question their assumptions and rethink every strategy. The energy in the room shifted from sheer terror to a tense anticipation, like watching a predator approach a creature that was not prey but a challenger, aware and ready. Students whispered quietly among themselves, astonished at the human's confidence, secretly wishing they could be as calm, realizing that bravery was not just about facing danger, but understanding it. The killer raised a hand slightly, threatening, testing reactions, but the human merely leaned forward a little, eyes sharp, analyzing, calculating, the faint smile never leaving their face. The classroom had transformed into a silent battlefield of wits, awareness, and anticipation, the human's unshakable calm turning the ordinary room into a stage for a deadly game. The killer's plan to dominate through fear was crumbling, replaced by growing tension, the knowledge that this human could be more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And in that charged moment, the human's quiet confidence spoke louder than words, a signal to everyone in the room that fear could be met with courage, danger could be faced with calculation. The students, witnessing the unfolding scene, realized that courage was not loud or aggressive, but composed, aware, and ready. And that sometimes the calmest person in the room is the most powerful. Even as the killer tried to maintain control, they could feel the shifting balance, the subtle truth that this human was no ordinary student, and that the story of this classroom had only just begun. Without warning, the killer made their first move, launching forward with speed and precision that would have frozen any ordinary person in place. The air seemed to crackle as the threat closed in, every step calculated to intimidate and to strike decisively, sending a wave of panic through the students. Chairs scraped the floor, pens dropped, and some students even screamed softly, expecting the worst to happen in the next instant. The human, however, did not flinch, did not even shift noticeably in their seat, instead watching the killer's approach with sharp, unblinking eyes. As the killer swung their weapon, aiming for a swift and deadly strike, the human's movements were almost invisible, subtle yet perfectly timed. A slight step to the side, a tilt of the body, and the weapon passed harmlessly by, colliding with the empty desk behind, sending a loud crash echoing across the room. The sound of metal striking wood made some students gasp, hearts pounding as they realized the human had narrowly avoided death by mere inches. But the human did not panic, did not gasp, and did not scream. Instead, a quiet laugh escaped them, a small, controlled sound that seemed almost out of place in the chaos. The laughter was light, but it carried an edge that unnerved the killer, who was not used to being mocked in the middle of an attack. Every calculated move of the human displayed not just awareness, but confidence, as if they had anticipated every possible action the killer could take. Other students stared in disbelief, unable to understand how one person could face a trained killer with such calm, how a laugh could replace the fear that had frozen them moments ago. The killer's eyes narrowed, irritation flickering, as they realized brute force and intimidation alone would not be enough, that their target was no ordinary student. The human's hands remained steady on the desk, yet every shift of their body, every slight movement of their feet hinted at hidden skill and readiness. It was a dance of life and death, where each motion had meaning, each decision could be a matter of survival, and yet the human made it seem effortless, almost casual. The killer, trying to regain control, launched another strike, faster and sharper this time, testing the human's reflexes. Once again, the human sidestepped, moving with precision that seemed impossible, the weapon missing its mark by only a fraction of an inch. The sound of the weapon hitting the wall reverberated through the classroom, shaking loose papers and startling nearby students. Some clutched their notebooks to their chests, others whispered prayers or quietly begged for the ordeal to end. But the human remained the calm center of the storm. Eyes tracking the killer, calculating timing, distance, and intent with a skill that left the students in awe. Every laugh, every subtle movement, every unshaken glance served as a quiet challenge, daring the killer to make a mistake, daring them to underestimate the human. The killer tried to change tactics, feinting, moving unpredictably, hoping to catch the human off guard. But the human's mind seemed to read every move, every shift of weight, every twitch of muscle, responding with the perfect counter at the perfect moment. The classroom, once a place of ordinary study, had turned into a deadly chessboard. Each action a move, each reaction a response to a threat far greater than the students could imagine. The human's quiet laughter, light yet sharp, echoed in the room, filling it with a strange energy, a mixture of fear and inspiration that made even the killer hesitate for a fraction of a second. That hesitation was all the human needed, a small opening to demonstrate control without violence, a reminder that awareness and calm could be more powerful than aggression. Students watched, some hiding behind desks, some peeking through their fingers, amazed at the unshakable confidence displayed before them. It was not bravado or recklessness. It was skill, experience, and the calm understanding that panic only leads to mistakes. The killer, now visibly frustrated, realized they were facing someone who could not be intimidated easily, someone whose mind and reflexes were a match for any threat they could throw. Every dodge, every laugh, every subtle glance strengthened the aura of the human, making it clear that the balance of power had shifted. The students, who moments ago had been frozen in terror, now saw hope, understanding that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it simply stands quietly, ready. The killer lunged one more time, more desperate than before, but the human, still calm, still analyzing, simply moved aside, letting the attack fail spectacularly. The room was silent for a heartbeat, the clash of skill and intent leaving a mark on everyone who witnessed it, a lesson that strength is not only in force, but in composure and awareness. It quickly became clear that the human was no ordinary student, and whispers began circulating quietly among the remaining students. Some remembered rumors of incredible feats, tales of survival against impossible odds, and the calm, unreadable expression the human now wore seemed to confirm them. The killer noticed the change as well, the realization dawning that brute force and fear would not work, that the person they had assumed to be an easy target was in fact highly skilled. Each movement of the human was precise and controlled, every subtle shift of weight or glance calculated, demonstrating an experience that the students could only marvel at. The killer circled slowly, testing the human, making sudden feints and attacks, attempting to catch them off guard. But the human reacted with perfect timing, sidestepping, leaning, and adjusting with a grace that seemed almost impossible. The killer's frustration grew with each failed attempt, as they began to understand that the human could anticipate and counter almost every move. The classroom became a tense arena, the ordinary desks and chairs transformed into obstacles and markers in a deadly game of skill and awareness. The students clung to their seats or hid behind desks, peeking with wide eyes, witnessing the human move as if they were born to survive moments like this. The killer's voice rose with anger, shouting threats and demands, trying to intimidate the human with words as well as action. Yet the human's expression remained calm, the faintest smile forming at the corner of their lips, a silent challenge that the killer could not ignore. It was a smile that carried confidence, knowledge, and the quiet power of someone who had faced danger countless times and emerged unscathed. The killer attempted more aggressive attacks, striking faster and with more force, hoping that sheer speed could break the human's composure. But every movement, every counter, every sidestep of the human displayed an almost preternatural awareness of distance, timing, and intent. The human did not just dodge or defend, they controlled the flow of the confrontation, letting the killer expend energy while maintaining perfect balance and calm. The students' fear began to mix with awe, as they realized that the human was not only surviving, but subtly dominating the encounter without making it obvious. Every sound in the room became amplified, the scrape of shoes, the clash of desks, the shifting of papers, and yet the human remained a steady center. The killer grew more desperate, changing strategies, attacking from different angles, trying to overwhelm the human with unpredictability. But the human adjusted effortlessly, reading the killer's body language, predicting movements before they happened, and responding with ease. The students watched, mesmerized, as if witnessing a performance where skill, experience, and calm met aggression and chaos head-on. It became clear that the human's calmness was not just bravery, but strategy, a deliberate use of patience and observation to control the situation. The killer's attacks, once confident and forceful, began to lose precision, slowed by the need to anticipate the human's responses. The room was filled with tension and energy, every student aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary, the kind of moment that would be remembered forever. Even the killer began to respect, grudgingly, the skill and composure of the human, recognizing that fear alone could not win here. The human shifted slightly in their seat, eyes tracking, fingers tapping lightly, a subtle rhythm that displayed readiness without giving away tactics. Each calculated movement, each small, precise adjustment served to teach the student silently. Courage is measured, awareness is power, and composure can be deadly. The killer tried one more feint, faster, sharper, hoping to break the rhythm, but the human anticipated it instantly, sidestepping and maintaining perfect balance. The classroom, once ordinary and predictable, now existed in a heightened state of awareness. Every participant caught between fear, awe, and realization. The human's quiet confidence became a beacon of hope for the students, a signal that even in the presence of a deadly threat, calmness and skill could turn the tide. The killer's aggression was met not with panic, but with intelligence and precision, the human's experience and observation controlling the flow of events. It was no longer just about survival. It was about mastery over the situation, teaching a lesson in restraint, awareness, and the subtle power of unshakable confidence. And in that charged atmosphere, every student understood that the human was more than a classmate. They were a force, a legend in the making, someone who could face danger and laugh unbroken. Desks were overturned and chairs toppled as the killer's frustration and aggression escalated, the room erupting into chaos. The sound of shattering glass and scraping metal echoed loudly, making the students flinch and press themselves against walls and corners, hearts pounding wildly. Some tried to crawl to safety, clutching textbooks like shields. Others whispered frantic prayers or froze entirely, unable to move from sheer terror. Amidst this storm of panic and confusion, the human remained calm, seated in the center, eyes sharp and observing every movement, a small smile tugging at the corner of their lips. The killer moved unpredictably now, throwing objects, swinging at empty air, attempting to destabilize the human's composure. Each attack was faster, sharper, and more aggressive, designed to overwhelm the human with sheer force and unpredictability. Yet the human responded effortlessly, dodging, leaning, and sidestepping with precision, making every strike fail. The human's movements were so smooth and controlled that it seemed as if the chaos itself obeyed their presence, the room bending subtly to their skill and awareness. The students watched in awe, hearts still racing, unable to understand how one person could remain so unshaken in the middle of such terror. Whispers ran through the room, incredulous observations of the human's calmness spreading quickly, a mixture of fear and hope in the air. Even the killer began to feel the tension shift, recognizing that brute force and intimidation alone could not conquer someone so prepared and aware. The human's laughter, quiet but sharp, filled the room intermittently, a sound that unnerved the killer and drew the attention of the students even further. Every movement of the human was deliberate, a dance of survival that combined awareness, experience, and instinct. They did not strike aggressively, yet every dodge, every sidestep, every subtle adjustment sent a message. Control lies in composure, not panic. The killer's frustration mounted with every failed attempt, their attacks becoming reckless, leaving openings that the human exploited with subtle skill. Students hid behind overturned desks, some peeking through fingers, witnessing a display of skill and courage unlike anything they had ever imagined. The killer tried to intimidate verbally, shouting threats, invoking fear, attempting to manipulate the students' panic into submission. But the human did not react to the words. Eyes focused, analyzing, ready for every possibility, their minds sharper than any weapon in the room. Even as papers flew through the air and chairs clattered to the ground, the human's calmness remained unbroken, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. Every laugh, every calculated movement, every small shift in position reinforced the unspoken truth. The human was in command, not the killer. The room became a battlefield of awareness versus aggression, control versus chaos, intelligence versus raw force. The human moved with subtle precision, barely touching the ground, dodging, adjusting, reading the killer's intentions before they could act. Students began to notice patterns, small hints of strategy and experience, realizing that what they were witnessing was not luck, but skill honed to perfection. Even the killer could not hide the growing respect mingled with frustration, understanding that fear alone would not win this confrontation. Every object the killer threw or swung was countered effortlessly, misdirected, or avoided entirely, making the attacker's effort seem wasted. The humans' laughter, quiet and controlled, echoed in the chaos, a sound that seemed to mock the killer without aggression, just with certainty. Some students dared to glance at the human, awe filling their eyes, hearts still racing, but inspired by the courage and skill they were seeing. The classroom, once ordinary and safe, had transformed into a proving ground, a stage where the human's ability to control and survive became the central focus. The killer's attacks became increasingly reckless, their frustration clouding judgment. Yet the human remained focused, reading every movement, every shift, every intention. The calm in the center of the storm created a magnetic tension, drawing attention and respect from all who could observe, teaching a silent lesson about composure and awareness. The students realized that courage was not about loud defiance, but about facing danger with clarity and precision, maintaining control when chaos ruled the surroundings. And through all the noise, panic, and destruction, the humans' quiet laughter and composed movements dominated the room, proving that intelligence, skill, and calm could overcome even the most violent aggression. The killer's frustration reached a peak as they realized their attacks had no effect. Their strikes met only with effortless dodges and precise counters. Every attempt to intimidate or overpower the human failed, leaving them stunned and off balance, their confidence slowly slipping away. The human's eyes followed every movement, calculating, predicting, reading intentions before the killer could act. It was not brute strength or luck that kept them safe. It was skill, awareness, and the quiet control of a mind trained to survive against impossible odds. With a sudden burst of speed, the human seized an opening, moving with such precision that the killer had no time to react. A weapon was twisted from the killer's grip and sent flying across the room, clattering loudly against the wall. The killer stumbled, shocked and enraged, realizing for the first time that they were no longer in control, that every strike, every plan, had been anticipated. The students, hiding behind overturned desks, watched with wide eyes, a mixture of fear and awe settling over them as the human demonstrated mastery without even standing up fully. The killer's eyes darted around the room, searching for any chance to regain dominance. But the human had already read every possible escape, every feint, every trick. Even as the killer lunged again, desperate and reckless, the human sidestepped with ease, using the momentum to destabilize their opponent further. It was a display of pure strategy, timing, and instinct, a combination that no ordinary person could match, and the students felt the weight of the skill in every movement. Whispers spread among the classmates, realizing that what they were witnessing was beyond anything taught in books, beyond any story they had ever heard. The classroom, once a place of normal lessons and quiet study, had become a stage for a silent lesson in survival, control, and dominance. Desks and chairs that had once been obstacles were now markers of strategy, spaces used to the human's advantage, guiding the killer into missteps. The killer's anger was palpable, every movement sharp and reckless, yet the human countered with calm precision, never hurried, never panicked. It was a dance of life and death, where intelligence and awareness triumphed over aggression and brute force. Each move leaving the killer more exhausted and frustrated. Students began to peek from their hiding spots, awe mixing with lingering fear, as the human moved almost effortlessly, a calm center in the storm of chaos. The killer tried to regain composure, to strike fear with words as well as action, but the human's quiet confidence ignored every threat. Every glance, every small movement of the human seemed to mock the killer subtly, daring them to try harder, to overreach, to make a mistake. The energy in the room shifted. The human was no longer just surviving. They were dominating the encounter without raising their voice or using unnecessary force. The killer's attacks became increasingly reckless, swinging wildly, lunging, and throwing objects in desperation. The human anticipated each strike, responding with subtle movements, sidesteps, and counterbalances, never fully revealing the depth of their skill. It was a lesson in patience and control, a demonstration that calm observation and experience could outmatch raw power and aggression. The students realized that fear alone could not win, that intelligence and awareness were just as deadly as any weapon in the hands of the skilled. With a final, calculated move, the human created an opening that immobilized the killer completely, leaving them off balance and unable to strike. The students gasped, unable to comprehend the swiftness and accuracy of the human's control, watching as the once feared attacker struggled helplessly. Even as the killer tried to recover, the human's calm stance, quiet smile, and composed gaze made it clear who held the true power in the room. The atmosphere shifted from fear to awe, the students slowly understanding that survival was not only about speed or strength, but about timing, awareness, and confidence. The human's every action, though subtle, had taught a lesson. Control the mind, read the opponent, anticipate every move, and remain calm in the face of danger. The killer's confidence had been shattered, replaced by disbelief and respect, realizing they were facing someone far beyond ordinary limits. The students' fear mixed with inspiration, witnessing the human's mastery and composure, knowing they had seen something truly extraordinary. And in that charged moment, the classroom became more than a room of study. It was a place where skill, intelligence, and courage proved stronger than raw aggression. Cornered and desperate, the killer made one final attempt to regain control, lunging with every ounce of strength and speed they could muster. Their attacks were sharper, faster, and more unpredictable. A deadly combination meant to overpower the human once and for all. The students held their breath, pressed against walls and desks, hearts pounding, certain that the end was near. But the human, still calm and composed, barely shifted in their seat, eyes tracking every motion, every intention, every subtle cue the killer offered. With a fluid, almost effortless movement, the human sidestepped the deadly strike, letting the killer's momentum carry them slightly past their target. It was a calculated maneuver, using the attacker's energy against them, leaving them off balance and vulnerable. The students gasped, unable to comprehend how the human remained so composed while the killer flailed, frustrated and shocked. The human's small, quiet smile hinted at amusement, a silent message that the killer's efforts were predictable and ineffective. The killer attempted another strike, desperate now, their confidence shattered, their attacks reckless, lacking the precision they had relied on before. The human anticipated the move instantly, countering with a perfectly timed motion that immobilized the killer without needing excessive force. Every student could see the contrast clearly. The once feared killer, now struggling helplessly, and the human calm and in total control. The classroom, once ordinary and quiet, had become a stage where skill, awareness, and composure dominated over aggression and fear. The human's gaze was steady, unwavering, meeting the killer's eyes without fear or hesitation, a silent challenge that left no room for doubt. Even in the face of raw desperation, the human maintained balance, timing, and strategy, demonstrating mastery over both the environment and the opponent. The killer's movements slowed, frustration and disbelief overtaking aggression, as they realized that every plan had been anticipated, every feint countered, every strike avoided. The students, once paralyzed with fear, now watched in awe, hearts racing, but minds inspired by the quiet power of the human before them. With precise timing, the human leveraged the killer's momentum to pin them in place, rendering them completely unable to strike or resist. It was a display of pure skill, a combination of awareness, reflexes, and strategy that left no doubt about who commanded the room. The killer struggled briefly, trying to recover, but the human's calm, calculated presence ensured that every attempt was futile. The students' whispers spread quickly, astonished murmurs at what they were witnessing, a single human dominating a trained killer without raising their voice. The human's small, controlled movements created an invisible barrier, a mastery of space and timing that made the killer's aggression ineffective. Every shift of weight, every tilt of the body, every subtle adjustment reinforced the human's dominance, turning fear into awe for the observing students. The killer's confidence, once formidable, had crumbled completely, replaced by recognition that they were facing someone far beyond ordinary limits. The classroom had become a testament to intelligence, experience, and composure, a place where courage and skill could outmatch even deadly aggression. The human did not need to shout, strike violently, or display anger. Their calmness alone was enough to command respect and control the situation. Students peeked cautiously, hearts still racing, but slowly realizing that the human's power came not from weapons or strength, but from mastery of self and environment. Every calculated movement sent a message. Panic weakens, awareness strengthens, and composure can turn the tide of any confrontation. The killer, now fully aware of their failure, could only struggle silently, trapped by their own aggression and the human's superior skill. The classroom, once filled with ordinary lessons and routine, now held a story that would be remembered forever. The human's calm, strategic dominance had transformed fear into admiration, panic into understanding, and chaos into a demonstration of extraordinary control. The students saw firsthand that true strength is not measured by weapons or brute force, but by intelligence, timing, and unshakable courage. And in that moment, the human remained seated, calm and composed, their quiet smile a testament to the power of awareness and mastery, leaving the killer completely subdued. Authorities arrived moments later, the sound of sirens growing louder as they rushed into the classroom. The killer, still immobilized by the human's precise control, was quickly restrained and escorted out, their confidence shattered, their threat neutralized. The students slowly emerged from hiding, shaking, hearts still racing, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear, awe, and disbelief. They whispered among themselves, recounting the incredible display of skill and calm they had just witnessed, unable to believe a single human could dominate a trained killer so completely. The humans sat back down calmly, brushing off dust from their clothes as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Their small smile never faded, eyes scanning the students briefly before returning to their notes, signaling the end of the ordeal without any need for words. The teacher, still pale and wide-eyed, approached cautiously, relief flooding their face as they realized that every life in the classroom had been preserved. Students could not stop staring, some approaching hesitantly to whisper their thanks or admiration, others too stunned to speak, hearts still pounding from the adrenaline of the encounter. The legend of the human's calmness and skill spread quickly throughout the school, each student recounting the events with growing amazement. Whispers of the day the killer entered the classroom and was subdued without a single student harmed became stories shared in every hallway and cafeteria. Even those who had only heard of the incident after the fact felt awe and curiosity, imagining the quiet power of the human who laughed in the face of danger. The classroom, once ordinary and predictable, was forever marked as the place where courage, skill, and awareness triumphed over raw aggression. The human's actions left a lasting impression on everyone present, teaching a silent lesson about composure, intelligence, and readiness. No student would forget the way the human remained calm while the killer lashed out, each movement measured and precise. Even the authorities, trained for countless emergencies, remarked on the efficiency and control displayed, recognizing that the human had handled a life-or-death situation with unparalleled skill. The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief, tension dissipating slowly as the extraordinary display of mastery sank into everyone's minds. The students, once paralyzed by fear, now felt a strange mixture of pride and inspiration, knowing they had witnessed something remarkable. Many would carry that lesson with them for years, that calm observation, quick thinking, and confidence can overcome even the most dangerous threats. The killer, led away in restraints, could only glare back at the human, realizing that their training and strength had been no match for intelligence and composure. It was a defeat that stung not only physically, but mentally, leaving them with the humbling awareness that some humans are capable of facing death with laughter and control. Slowly, the classroom returned to a semblance of normalcy. Desks righted, papers collected, and chairs replaced. Yet the memory of the chaos remained vivid. Students shared their stories with each other in hushed tones, pointing out moments where the human's calmness had turned the tide, highlighting small gestures that had saved lives. Even the teacher, once shaken, began to regain composure, marveling at the human's focus and the extraordinary skill that had neutralized a killer without violence. The human, however, made no grand gestures, no speeches, no display of ego. Simply returning to their seat as if the entire event had been routine, word of the incident spread beyond the school, stories shared with neighbors, families, and eventually in local news, though no one could fully capture the calm confidence of the human. The students who had witnessed it firsthand knew the truth. Bravery is not loud or aggressive. It is quiet, calculated, and unwavering in the face of terror. The classroom, once just a place of learning, had become a monument to courage, awareness, and the human capacity to confront danger with intelligence rather than panic. And as the human continued their quiet routine, the lesson was clear to everyone. True strength lies not in weapons or size, but in skill, perception, and the courage to remain calm when the world seems to fall apart. By the time the authorities left and the last student had left the room, the memory of the day remained vivid. Etched in every mind present, stories of the humans' laughter, their precise movements, and their unshakable calm spread, inspiring awe and respect far beyond the walls of the classroom. The students would carry that lesson for life, remembering the day a killer entered their classroom and was subdued not by force, but by intelligence and composure. And in that moment, the human proved that courage, skill, and calmness could transform ordinary people into legends, leaving everyone who witnessed it in awe